What's up YouTube? Brian here, back again with another video. Today is going to be a special one because I've been wanting to do this video for a while now, and with the looming release of the Megabass P5 rods, the reboot or the relaunch of the USA Destroyer rods that are coming out in February, I figured this is a perfect time to do a full retrospective and look back on the rods that were originally launched for the US market in the Destroyer line back in 2017. So I've owned almost every single rod in the USA Destroyer line, except for the swim bait rods. I've kind of stayed away from those because I'm not a swim bait guy, but I've owned pretty much every other rod, and I still have a bunch of them. So I'm going to literally go through my personal collection of USA Destroyer rods. I'm going to tell you a little bit about each rod and what I've liked about them or didn't like. We're just going to go through all the rods. I'm going to kind of freestyle and talk about them. And hopefully if you're shopping the new P5 rods, you can look at this video and kind of get a general idea of where some of the strengths are in these particular models. Now, I've not actually touched any of the P5 rebooted USA Destroyer rods. There's a lot of people out there that have them and have been demoing them. I'm not one of them. So I have no idea if any of the stuff from these old rods is going to really translate to the new rods. Maybe, we'll see. But this video is more just a look back on, in my opinion, is what some of the best rods that I've ever used as a fisherman is these old Megabass USA Destroyer rods. I'm a big fan of them. There's a reason they're still around. It's because I use them all the time. And so we're just going to dive deep. And then we'll talk a little bit about the rods as we go. Some of the rods in this lineup are not being rebooted in the new USA P5 Destroyer relaunch, which is a bit of a bummer. So some of these are like legit deprecated, like they're legit retired. You're never going to be able to see them again. You might be able to pick them up on the aftermarket. All right, we're going to start with the bait casting rods, and then we'll move into the spinning rods. I'm going to start off with probably the most popular rod in the bait casting line, and that is this bad boy, the Megabass USA Destroyer 110 Special. I'll say that throughout the years, this is the rod people have been after the most, and this has been the hardest rod to get out of people's hands. So when people have these, they rarely pop up on the aftermarket. People who have these rods use the snot out of them. This rod sold really well when it came out. It was actually really hard to get your hands on this rod. It was really out of stock all the time. So this was one of the original launched rods in 2017. I think it was like April, May 2017 is when these came out. And a lot of people consider this to be the jerkbait rod. Like, this is arguably the best rod that Megabass has made to throw just the regular standard Vision 110s. You can also throw deeper diving jerkbaits on this thing for sure. I've thrown the 110 plus ones with no problem on these. I've not tried the 110 plus 2. Anyway, the point is, this is the quintessential jerkbait rod. This is coming back in the P5 line. You can also use this as a topwater rod if you want to throw poppers, walking baits, all that kind of stuff. Let's see, spec-wise, it's an F4, and it is a 611. I did a review on this rod many years ago, and my favorite thing about this rod is just simply how long of a cast you can bomb out with this particular rod, and then how you can impart action on the jerkbait at the very end of the cast really easily. This thing has a really good tip and good action for just going toot toot and getting that jerkbait moving right when it hits the water. I usually cast out, crank down about 2-3 times just to get it under the surface, and then just start, twitch, pause, that kind of stuff. So anyway, this is going to be a really popular rod in the P5 line. Good luck. If you're going to grab one of these, I would grab them right away, because I have a feeling that this, just like when it was out in the US Destroyer, is going to be a tough rod to find. So I still have it. I still use it all the time. I'm running, as you'll see, most of my USA Destroyer rods are all running Zillions. This is a Zillion 8-speed. I like running an 8-speed reel on jerkbaits, and I'm running 12-pound straight fluorocarbon. So that is the 110 Special. Amazing, very special rod. Super excited to see it reboot in the new Destroyer line. So this is another one I use quite a bit, and this is the Deimos. I also did a video review on the Deimos. This rod is also coming back in the new P5 line, although I don't really know why. I think this rod is probably one of the weaker rods in the whole P5 or in the whole USA Destroyer lineup, because it's kind of like a jack of all trades, but it's not really a master of one. Let's see, what's the rating on this thing? This is an F5.72, so 7 foot 2 inch F5, which basically makes it a medium heavy. The Deimos has a soft-ish tip. Oops, just knocked over a rod. It has a soft-ish tip, but it is pretty stout. What this rod was kind of designed for was single hook moving baits, like throwing a spinnerbait, a chatterbait. I actually find it a little underpowered, maybe for throwing like a 1/2 ounce spinnerbait. I definitely prefer other rods. What I did find that this rod is excellent at is swim jigs. This is a really great swim jig rod. I like to throw 1/4 ounce to 3/8 ounce swim jigs for the most part. And this has basically been my primary swim jig rod for years. It's pretty much all I throw on it. You can throw a Texas rig on it, although I think it's a little soft for a Texas rig. It's not the most sensitive rod in the world, to be perfectly frank. It's not the best chatterbait rod. It's not a great swim bait chatterbait. I'm sorry, it's not a great chatterbait. It's not a great spinnerbait rod. It's not a great buzzbait rod. It can do it. It's perfectly adequate, but it is a really great swim jig rod. Like when you got to get swim jigs up and over grass and you're fishing shallow swim jigs, 1/4 ounce, I've had a lot of fun with this rod. So it's basically become my go-to swim bait rod. I don't think in the rebooted line it's gonna be all that popular if I had to predict, because you already have the Dark Sleeper, which kind of does most of the things that this thing can do. I don't really see why they released the Deimos when you already had the Dark Sleeper. It seems a little odd to me, but anyway, the Deimos is coming out again, so you Deimos fans, there you go. It's not a rod I would buy personally in the P5 line. That's just my personal opinion. Now, a rod that is officially retired and not coming out in the new P5 line, which is a bummer, because I think this rod should have been relaunched instead of the Deimos, because this is a way better rod. And this is the Automat. So the Automat is a really weird and unique topwater rod, and I love this thing. I've been using the snot out of this as soon as it came out. This rod wasn't in the original wasn't in the original USA Destroyer launch. So in 2017, this didn't come out. I think like about a year later, they added a couple more rods to the lineup, and this is one of them. This rod is really uniquely spec'd because it is it's a 7.1, which is interesting for a topwater rod, and an f4.5. But this thing has a really deep parabolic, it has a deep action. And what makes this rod fun is you can make really, 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 really long casts with poppers and walking baits. So I run this rod with the Zillion 8-speed as well, but I do braid to a very small, about 1 foot long fluorocarbon leader. I think my leader is about right here. So from like here to here is fluorocarbon. And then I go to a snap, and then I just change out whatever topwater bait I use. And because of this braid to fluorocarbon combination with this really kind of whippy 7.1 rod, you can make monster long casts, especially with like a topwater walking bait like a spook or a diamante or a vixen or a kick knocker. But also, it just launches poppers. This is a great popper rod. So what's cool about this rod is you can make real long casts, and when you get it tipped down and you're doing the walking action, this thing, I like this way better than throwing like a 610 or 611 topwater rod. I think this 7.1, like the longer topwater rod, is actually a lot of fun, and there's benefits to it, like being able to make those really long casts. So overall, I've caught a ton of fish on this. This is my favorite topwater rod. I have literally, because of the 110 special and because of the Automat, I've never looked or really tested other jerkbait and topwater rods, because I love these two. It's like I'm not going to find something I enjoy more than the 110 special and the Automat. So why try? So anyway, these two rods, like the Automat and the 110, are like staples in my rod locker. These rods are always there, and they are fantastic. And it is sad that the Automat is not being brought back in the P5 line. I think it should have been brought back over the Deimos. My personal opinion. Okay, the next rod we have to talk about, and this one is coming back in the P5 line, and this is a gem, and this is the Javelin. I love the Javelin. I've professed my love about the Javelin for many years. It's just a super versatile rod by all accounts. It is longer. It's a 7.5 fully carbon rod. This has no glass in it whatsoever, but this is a great moving bait rod. I use the Javelin these are the things I use my Javelin for the most. Spinnerbaits. It's my main spinnerbait rod. Throwing 3/8 to 1/2 ounce spinnerbaits is amazing on this. Really great spinnerbait rod. Number 2, this is my main chatterbait rod when I'm ripping grass. So when I'm throwing chatterbaits out 3/8 half and I want to get it down on the grass and pull it out, the Javelin comes out because of the power. Also, awesome square bill rod. I just love throwing either like 1.5 up to 2.5 bigger square bills, basically any like little bigger crankbaits that I want to throw around grass that run anywhere from shallow to 6 to 8 feet. Javelin's great. Also, sick wake bait rod. This is a great plopper rod, great wake bait rod. So throwing those wake baits like the overhead crank, basically any weight bait. Awesome. Can throw the smaller whopper ploppers, no problem. Also, great buzzbait rod. This thing is great at throwing buzzbaits. I mean, I've thrown tons of buzzbaits in really heavy cover with the Javelin, gotten fish out, no problemo. And then the last thing is this is a sleeper, deeper cranking rod. You can throw like your Deep X 300. You can throw deep diving crankbaits on this thing and it can handle it. Like I said, it's super versatile. There's literally a lot of stuff you can't do on the Javelin. Like if I was in a pinch to throw a football jig, I could throw it on this. If I was in a pinch to throw a Texas rig deep, I could throw it on this. The Javelin's just an awesome rod, and I hope people really discover it in the P5 line and get behind it, because this is one I would buy in the P5 line. Like, it's such a good rod. I hope they kept all of its characteristics in the new version, because this is a sick rod. And of course, throwing on a zillion. This is a 7-speed with 15-pound. I believe it's Invisix fluorocarbon. So yeah, Javelin's awesome. Okay, the next casting one we're going to talk about. I don't have a reel on this right now, and this is the flipping stick in the P5 line, and this is the bad boy. This is the Warhammer. So the Warhammer is one bad mamma jamma. It's got double-footed guides all the way up the top. It's got this just monster cork handle that's really fun to use. This is just a sick rod. The only downsides to this rod is because of the big double-footed guides and how beefy this thing is, it's super tip heavy. So flipping this thing is like, even if you put a heavy reel on this thing, it's still pretty tip heavy. And then also this piece of cork right here tends to move a little bit because it's not connected to this bigger piece. There's this cosmetic piece. This piece can be a little shifty. Some people don't like that. It's just basically a design flaw. I wish they would just use one piece of cork all the way down through, but it's not a problem. Mine isn't totally broke loose and doesn't move around, but is definitely, you can feel that that's a little disconnected from the rest of the rod. That's my only other complaint, but this thing is fun. If you flip, heavier, like 3/4 to 1 1/4 ounce, 1 ounce. I threw a 1 ounce on this thing a lot. You can really jack some fish out of some really, really heavy cover. Megabass is not known for their flipping sticks. Flipping sticks is not Megabass's jam, but this is definitely probably the best flipping stick they've ever made, because this is a true heavy big boy flipping stick. It's 711. This thing is rated up to 2 ounces, but it's an F8 power, which is pretty high for Megabass. Here's the thing. This isn't being rebooted in the P5 line, but they are doing what's called the Jungle 7, which I believe is a rod they've done in the past in other like Japanese rods. I could be wrong. I'm not a great Megabass historian, but the Jungle 7 is a 711 flipping stick that's coming out in the P5 line, but it is light. It's small. It's half a power lighter than this. Now I'm very interested to see in the Jungle 7 rebooted flipping stick in the P5 line if it's going to have the double-footed guides and if it's going to be a full cork handle like this. I'm sure there's pictures out there already. Whatever. I'm interested in the Jungle 7 P5 flipping stick. If they can get the Warhammer into a slightly lighter package that's balanced better, but still retains that 711, I can punch with a full ounce, Megabass might have a winner on their hand. But, you know, Megabass is just... jig and worm and flipping sticks is not the Megabass deal. It's like not what they're great at. But the Warhammer is pretty badass. Okay. So we're going to move into spinning rods. And the first one I'm going to talk about is probably the one people are most interested in, because it's been an impossible rod to find on the aftermarket, and that is the Addermine. So the Addermine was the only original spinning rod that was launched in the USA Destroyer line. About a year later, they released the Felicia and the Brigand, which I also have. But the Addermine was the first one, and it was hard to get. Like, this rod was sold out all the time. Really hard rod to pick up, just like the 110 Special. It's a gem. I've done a lot of speaking about this rod in the past. I have a review up of it, but this is basically an amazing Ned rig rod. It's an amazing small boot tail, paddle tail, swim bait rod. Definitely a good drop shot rod. A lot of people drop shotted with this when it first came out. It was kind of considered the like Megabass drop shot rod for a while. I'm gonna keep knocking. This is hard to do. I got a lot of rods here. We'll pick those up in a sec. But first off, the grip on this thing is one of the best grips in the world. This thing's balance is amazing for a small rod. I can't really do the finger trick right here, but anyway, balance amazing. Feels great in the hand. Tons of power. This is like a medium. action spinning rod, but it does have a soft tip. So you got that soft tip into a really firm backbone right here. And then it just kicks into the power the rest of the way down the rod. Awesome all-around finesse rod. This is going to be really popular in the P5 line. However, I'm not going to buy one because I have the OG, which has one of the best handles ever created. And I don't really love the P5 spinning rod handles. And in fact, I think they kind of suck. So to me, this is fine the way it is. I don't feel a reason to go out and buy the Addermine. However, because a lot of people haven't had the opportunity to get the Addermine, going and grabbing this in the P5 line is definitely a great move. I think it's definitely a gap in the Megabass spinning rod line right now. I think the P5 version of the Addermine is going to be super popular. If you want one, go grab one. Great. It's going to be the drop shot rod. It's going to be the Ned rig rod. It's going to be the paddle tail swim bait rod. Just any all around finesse tactics and capabilities, blah, blah, blah. Addermine can probably do it. So really great rod. Super happy with it. Right now I have an Xsense 3000 on it. Okay. So another rod that is coming back is this one. And this is a popular rod as well, but this is a really niche rod. This is the Felicia. The Felicia wasn't super popular when it came out. It kind of had a little bit of a cult following going. Oliver and I got this rod to be a little more popular because of how good it throws the Okashira screwheads. But this was not a popular rod. When this rod first came out, I don't think it sold that well. And it also, Megabass didn't seem to make that many of them. So they only would come in and out of stock really random times. And towards the end of the life cycle of these rods, this thing was really hard to find in stock. Like, no one had them. I just don't think they sold well. I don't think Megabass made that many of them. But it is interesting that they're bringing it back. Now, the Felicia is a 7.6, very, very whippy F2. So this thing is definitely what Megabass would consider a medium light to light. It's almost a light. But if you notice, this thing has a really weird tip. So it's very bendy, but look where it kind of kicks in right here. It's hard to describe the action on this rod, but what's great about this rod is the rebound. So it snaps back, like for its length and how light this thing is, like the tip recovers like really quick. I don't know if you can see that, but compared to like a G Loomis version of this rod, this thing is like bounces back really quick. I personally pretty much only use this rod for hair jigs. And for Okashira, like I throw the screw heads on this thing and it's great. Really lightweight baits are good on this rod. Also, I know people like throwing light drop shots, so nose hooking drop shots with maybe like lighter weights, like quarter and down. People definitely drop shot with this rod as well. But this is very niche, and I'm surprised that Megabass brought the Felicia back in the P5 line. I guess they don't really have a nice long whippy light spinning rod. But yeah, this rod definitely has a fan base. A lot of people are into this. It's really hard to find this particular rod. I've seen people try to cop one of these for months and just could never find one. So it's cool it's coming back. This grip is superior to the P5 grip. But anyway, so that's the Felicia. If you're into hair or throwing really light paddle tail swim baits or just really any lightweight baits in general, the Felicia is the rod for you. But it is 7.6, so be aware that it is a very long rod. Okay, finally, this is the rod that is being discontinued, but there's a very similar rod to this in the Orochi line, which is the Enforcer. So even though the Brigand is officially dead and retired and deprecated, you can still get this similar of a rod, like a rod that basically matches the specs of this thing in the Orochi. So I love this rod. I use this thing for dark sleepers, for finesse jigs. You know, it's just kind of a great all-around medium heavy spinning rod. Great tube rod as well. So when I'm cracking tubes and throwing tubes on the bottom, this thing is coming out. Overall, just a really fun rod. It feels like almost like a bait casting rod with how much power this thing has. So if you kind of want to throw bait cast level jigs or spinner baits, any of that kind of stuff, but you don't want to use a bait caster, hand someone the Brigand. It can handle most of that stuff. I had a buddy who doesn't like bait casters, but we had a good spinner bait going, so I threw a 3/8 ounce spinner bait on this thing and it handled bass pike no problem whatsoever. So anyway, it's a really versatile, heavier power spinning rod, but unfortunately it is 100% retired and is never coming back from what I can tell. So hopefully this video was good for you guys. A couple things I want to note is In the new models, okay, one that's missing from this lineup is the FMJ. I had the FMJ twice. The first time I had it, I used it, I broke it. Like, I set the hook on a fish and some reeds and the rod literally exploded. Like, it cracked in like 5 places. I blew up an FMJ, like just destroyed it. Second one I got a replacement. Second one I stepped on it. So I actually cracked it and broke it. And then from that point forward, I actually swapped that rod out with Felicia. So I never got another FMJ. The FMJ that's being rebooted in the P5 line is a completely different rod. It is longer. It's an F3. Here, I'll just go over to the specs real quick here. So we'll jump over to the laptop. So yeah. So the new FMJ, we're just looking at the Hookup Tackles website right here. So the new FMJ is going to be an F673, so it's going to be a little longer than the old FMJ, which is cool. So it's a totally different rod. I don't even know what the new FMJ is going to feel like. To me, it seems like they're going for that NRX 873 range right there. So it could be a really good, versatile all-around rod. And I have to predict, I think the FMJ is good. The new FMJ is going to be really popular because I think it's going to make up for what the X-Bites lacked. So I think a lot of people who maybe were unimpressed with the power or the versatility of the X-Bites or the lack of versatility in the X-Bites is going to probably gravitate towards the FMJ. So I think here in the US, that's going to be a really popular rod. The BMJ is a very interesting rod. Is there really a need for a heavy football jig rod? Because it says like, oh, it's going to be a 7.5 F7, which is a pretty powerful rod. It's going to be rated up to 1.5 ounces. So I guess you people out there who throw 3/4 ounce football jigs are going to be super stoked. I'm not super interested in this rod. I think they went too heavy on the power. The Vidalia or whatever, I think this rod is almost similar to that, at least like in the specs wise. Who knows? I don't know. This BMG's the question mark for me. I got to get my hands on it and see what it feels like. They brought back the Mark 56, which is a swim bait rod. I'm sure people who were stoked that this is coming back are excited. I know the old Mark 56 had a lot of breakage issues. A lot of people broke the Mark 56 in the original US Destroyer line. So hopefully they fix some of the breakage issues in the P5 line. So, but yeah, so we're getting the 110 Special. We're getting the Deimos. We're getting the new rehashed FMJ. This is a completely new rod. The BMJ is, I think, the totally out of left field. No one saw that coming. Mark 56, that's a rod they already had. Just bringing back. The Jungle 7 is essentially the Warhammer replacement. It's a little lighter, but it's the same length. I'm pretty excited to check that thing out. So, and then of course, over on the spinning side, we're getting the Addermine back, and we're getting the Felicia. The downside to all this is rods are going to be more expensive. When the original Destroyers came out, they were $399 to, I think the most expensive rod was $425. And these things are going to be $500. So you're getting a price increase to get these rods back in your lineup. So I'd say if I'm going to buy any, the ones I would be definitely targeting would be the 110 Special if you want the jerkbait rod. The FMJ looks really interesting. I would probably skip the Deimos. I don't think the Deimos is really all that compelling. Also, I'm also noticing that the Javelin is missing off of this list, but I thought the Javelin was coming back. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the Javelin is not returning, but I'm pretty sure it is. Maybe it's just not on his website maybe the Javelin's not coming when the initial release happens, but I hope it comes back soon. That's all I got for this video. I hope if you made it this far, please hit like and subscribe. I just kind of wanted to do a brain dump and talk through a bunch of my favorite US Destroyer rods. They're still in my lineup. I still use them all the time, and they are not going anywhere. Maybe some of them might be replaced with the P5 versions if they're really that much better, but I highly doubt it. But anyway, if you made it this far in the video, thank you for watching, and we will see you on the next one.